Welcome in. This is the Tar Heel Herald. I'm back at it, coming at you with a schedule preview and a game-by-game prediction. First, I'd like to add that I will be running the UNC Twitter account for Clutch Sports. Go ahead and follow me there. The link will be in the description, as I will be tweeting and giving any info for the UNC athletics. If you happen to be a fan of another team, go check out the Twitter account associated with that team as well. Also, give us a like and subscribe, and if you want to let me know your predictions, hit me up in the comments. So I will quickly run down my analysis of our current team and roster, then a quick synopsis of the entire schedule as a whole, then get into the game-by-game analysis and prediction. First, I'd like to start off talking about how Mac Brown has taken a team that won 5 games in the previous 2 seasons and riddled with tons of holes in the roster, and immediately sends them to the Orange Bowl berth in year 2. Now, everyone returns from that Orange Bowl except for Daz Newsome, and we kept up with one of the best teams in the country. Number 5 team in Texas A&M was almost primed to get into the CFP last year, but we kept up with them all the way until the last 3 minutes. Kind of fell off a little bit, but Mac Brown, who I think is one of the best roster managers in the country, he's peeking his head into national recruiting now. 2021, he kind of stuck with just North Carolina, which the North Carolina 2021 group of kids really helped us out, as there was tons and tons of talent that year. And it almost was perfectly for what our roster needed as well. But he's starting to peek his head into Virginia now. Dre Bly is from the 757, so Dre Bly is taking over most of that, and he's doing a fantastic job in Virginia. And of course, they're obviously keeping as many targets from in-state that they loved. So I keep up with a lot of the recruiting. And if you want to know anything about the recruiting, definitely go follow me on that Twitter account. His first season, we went 6-6 with all of our losses within a touchdown, even the Clemson game. Year 2, we lost 2 games that were slip-ups, and that we mostly lost as a result of our defensive struggles. And Jay Bateman had to scheme his butt off, in my opinion, in order to keep us in a lot of those games last year. I think this is also a great schedule and sets up in our favor, which I'll get into that later. So as many of you know, we lost a lot of skill players in the wide receiver and running back group. However, like I said, he is very good at roster management, goes into the transfer portal, pulls Ty Chandler, and I think Ty Chandler fits very well for our offense and Phil Longo's offense. Now, the one thing we need is someone else to step up and into that backup role to keep Ty fresh. I don't know if we're going to have a duo or run by committee. However, I think we just need at least someone who can give Ty Chandler some rest, and I think Ty Chandler can do the rest himself, to be honest. The offensive line all returns, which helps Ty a ton, as they are specializing in the run blocking game. They just manhandle that line. They basically will give you 2 yards without even having to be touched by anyone on almost every carry. Now, the offensive line really needs to step up in the pass protection to help Sam out. And, of course, Sam has to also get better with his decision-making and get rid of the ball. And if you combine those 2 aspects into our game, I think we can really have an even better offensive production in 2021 than we did in 2020. Now, Sam and the wide receivers should be fine. A lot of people think that the wide receiver group is going to have a drop-off. I don't think we're going to have much at all. And I think we're going to have an even better group, to be honest. We have Josh Downs, who's coming into his sophomore year, should make a step up into a huge role. And we have tons of other options for Phil Longo to choose from, with Emory Simmons, Joffrey Brown, who is De'Ami Brown's little brother. Bo Corrales is coming back from an injury. Then, of course, you got Garrett Walston as a super senior for that tight end group. I also think that we could even see some 2 tight end setups, as Morales was starting to look very good at the end of the year last year, and could see his way onto the field helping out Garrett Walston. Now, the biggest factor into my prediction is the drastic step up in the defense we have. The 2020 defensive line unit only had 3 true interior defensive line that weren't freshmen. Of course, we had a few freshmen, but a lot of them were injured or riddled with injuries. And even then, they really didn't even want to. Without the spring practice, we didn't play a lot of freshmen, being that of the COVID year. And one of them being Tamari Fox was a sophomore who had yet to even have a spring practice himself because he didn't come in early. Now, we have a lot of bodies to choose from, which is going to utilize our edge rushers correctly, which should allow Jay Bateman to cook up some great schemes. And the defense is all going to start here, including our linebackers in that front seven. And our linebackers are experienced with Jeremiah Gemmel. Eugene Asante is going into his junior season. Now, Eugene looks primed to show out. I think he's going to handle Chaz Surratt's role very well. So keep an eye out as well on the freshmen to prove worthy for a small role. I know for a fact they're gonna really help our special teams out. But in general, I think this linebacker group may not have the biggest depth, but has tons and tons of talent that I think we should be great there as well. So this front seven looks fantastic in my opinion. Yes, they're going to be a little young with that defensive line, but overall, I think there's tons of depth, and we can get a lot more substitutions, especially whether or not it's going to be an obvious run play or pass play. But this defensive line depth, the linebacker, and definitely the edge rushing depth is going to help us out a ton with staying fresh all the way to the fourth quarter, where we had issues with the top programs, of course, with Notre Dame and Texas A&M last year. And of course, the biggest part of this defense that everybody is excited about is the defensive backs. And I as a whole, now some people don't think the safeties is going to be as top notch as the cornerbacks. I beg to differ, just for the fact that we have a ton of depth and lots of experience in the safety unit. But the DBs are loaded. Arguably one of the best tandems in the country for the cornerbacks with Tony Grimes and Storm Duck. And then, of course, coming off the bench, which I don't know if he'll have another role as a nickelback or dimeback, but the duo with Tony Grimes and Storm Duck is going to be one of the best. Storm Duck, coming into his sophomore year, was already on preseason All-American polls, whether it be first team or second team. And then this year, although he got injured in his sophomore year, he still is already on a lot of people's preseason All-American polls, along with Tony Grimes, and I believe they're going to have a fantastic year together, especially with the defensive line able to get to the quarterback a whole lot better this year. It's going to help these guys keep track of these wide receivers and not have to chase them around all day long. Now, the safety units, again, I'm very high on, especially because of the fact that Jaquarius Conley's not going to be really, I don't think he is. He's going to be in the nickelback position anymore. I think he's going to be pushed to the safety unit, and I think he's going to have a great sophomore year there. And of course, you got Don Chapman, Trey Morrison, Cameron Kelly, and who knows what other underclassmen could step up there. I honestly feel comfortable saying both these units should be in the top 25. Of course, our offense will probably be in the top 10, but both of these should be in the top 25 in their respective categories, if not scratching at the door with the defense. And I think if the defense can get to the top 25, we'll have a spectacular year. All right, let's get into the schedule. Now, the worst part about this schedule, in my opinion, is we start off with 2 huge Virginia games early on in the year in Week 1 and Week 2. Week 1, we have a huge game at Lane Stadium going against Virginia Tech. Now, Virginia Tech is kind of I wouldn't say they're falling off. Some people say Justin Fuente is in the hot seat. I don't really see it. I mean, yes, he had some issues recruiting, but I give the guy some slack. I think he'll turn this program back around. The other part we have is Virginia in week 3. Now, Mac Brown has not beaten Virginia yet since being at the program, and it's actually the only team in the Coastal that Mac has not beaten yet. Now, I see that we could easily go 1-1 in these two games if we don't start off strong. And then after that, we have a nice easy run between Georgia Tech, Duke, and a huge revenge game at home versus FSU before heading into what not only will decide the Coastal most likely, but also impact our chances into the CFP for both teams. If we haven't slipped up to this point, with Miami and Notre Dame after a bye. So while our two biggest matches are technically back-to-back, we do get an amazing bye week before heading into South Bend. Then we end the schedule with a good tail end to the season as well, with a decent finish in Wake Forest, Pitt, and the last non-con of Wofford, and then we head, of course, into rivalry week against NC State. Quickly, I want to point out before I get into game by game, there's a possibility that we are favored in every single game. And the reason I say this is because, obviously everyone we should be favored in most likely, besides Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame has a very tough schedule. Notre Dame faces there's a few games before us in Cincinnati, USC, and I don't know if there's someone else before us. I know there's some after us, but Cincinnati and USC, along with us, all have bye weeks before Notre Dame. So Notre Dame could easily catch 1 or 2 losses before leading up to our game. And if Notre Dame has 2 losses while we possibly being undefeated, yes, we go into South Bend, but we still could be favored in that game. So just look out for that. The fact that we have a fairly easy schedule. Schedule sets up perfectly, and we could be favored in every single game, if not almost all of them. Now, I think our ceiling is easily undefeated. Now, the floor could be, like I said, let's say the 2 Virginia games, 1-1, maybe 1-1 in the Miami and Notre Dame game, and then maybe another slip up after that. So I think the floor is probably 4 losses. But all right, enough of that. Let's jump into the game by game predictions. So again, like I said before, Virginia Tech, our first game in Lane Stadium, is going to be a tough one. Virginia Tech has a good chunk returning on the offense, including an amazing tight end, James Mitchell, who gave us some trouble last year, and their top 2 wide receivers. Now, they do lose their best offensive lineman to the draft, but I think the offensive line unit overall should be fine, as it always is. But I think the main thing you have to look at is Hendon Hooker is gone, and they have most likely Burmeister is going to be the starter. And I am not very high on Burmeister, and I just don't think he is enough to carry this offense going against our defense this year. Their defense lost a lot, and they still have to work with a new defensive coordinator going into his second year. I think this offense is going to have a shootout with us in order to keep up with our offense, but I just don't think Burmeister is enough, in my opinion, in order to get over our defense enough to keep up with us. So I'm going to go ahead and chalk this one up as a win. Then we jump into a home game with Georgia State. It is a group of 5 team. They were pretty decent last year, but I don't think Georgia State is going to be enough. So I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up as a win. UVA returns a fair amount, and I love their coach Bronco Mendenhall, and I think he can elevate them after this COVID year to a stronger season than last year. They were keeping themselves into a lot of games, so I don't think their overall record shows how well that team is. I just don't think the strong run game is going to be enough for them to keep into this game. We have a much better secondary, and it will make it tough on Brendan Armstrong, to really keep in. Now, I know he had a pretty good game against us, but ultimately he wasn't that great of a passer. And with our upgrades in the secondary, I think he's going to struggle again against our pass defense. So if the run game doesn't carry, I think this should be an easy win for us and finally get our first win versus UVA under Mac Brown. Now I'm going to go ahead and already say the next 3 games I think are going to be wins versus Georgia Tech, Duke, and FSU. I think Georgia Tech, like a lot of other people, is going to be primed for a better season on paper, but they have a very tough schedule this year, and I don't think they're going to make that huge of a leap. That I think now 2022 is going to be a different story, in my opinion. Jeff Sims will be in his senior year, and they'll have much, much more talent on the roster going into that 2022 year. So look out for Georgia Tech in that year. I just don't think 2021 is their year. Duke, I'm acting as if they are similar to Wofford and Georgia State and just giving us a win without question. Although I think Georgia State may even be better than them. Just they don't have anything but a good running back. They have a fantastic running back. I just don't think there is anything besides him. Now, FSU is a little tricky. They did beat us last year, and this is going to be a huge revenge game. And I think the huge key factor, although Mike Norvell is recruiting his butt off, got a ton of people in the transfer portal. I think the huge thing you're going to see is the fact that this is at home as a revenge game. Yes, Mackenzie Milton could come in, light the world on fire, but I don't think he's going to be able to keep us in check, and be able to pull out the win at home for us. So go ahead, mark those all 3 as wins in my opinion, and then we move on to the biggest part of our schedule, and that is Miami. Now, Miami, biggest thing we got going on here is the fact that this is also a home game right after the FSU game. They lose a lot on their defensive line. I think the defensive line will be good. They're going to have to, again, they have to replace a lot, but I think they should be fine. I just don't think they're going to still be able to handle the run game again. Now, it won't be anything like last time, I assume, but being that they have a great secondary, I believe we'll attack that front 7 heavily, and Ty Chandler is going to be in his comfort zone by this time of the year, and I think he's going to do a great job. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a huge believer in King, especially coming off of a torn ACL. I don't think he's going to be 100%, and I think it's going to show in that Alabama game. And I think we're going to do similar things as last year in shutting him down. I think he has weapons that will help him a good amount, a great offensive coordinator in Rhett Lashley, but ultimately I think we get the job done here, piggybacking off of the defense mostly. Now, Notre Dame is a very interesting one. I'm very, very bearish on Notre Dame this year. Their offensive line is gone. The defense took a hit, and their QB for a long time of Ian Book is gone as well. And they have to replace him with either Jake Cohn or Buchanan, I think. Now, Jake Cohn transferred from Wisconsin. I don't think he even would have beat out Graham Mertz. Now, I think he'll probably beat Tyler Buckner or Buchanan, whichever it is. I think the biggest thing is their offense is going to struggle. Now, the defense is going to be fine, in my opinion, as it always is, especially because Marcus Freeman, who I think is actually an upgrade from Clark Lee, and I think he's going to keep this defense very fine-tuned. He's already showed that he's a great recruiter. But now, as I think Notre Dame could have 2 losses at this point with, Wisconsin, Cincinnati, USC, maybe even FSU in the beginning. There are tons of options here as they could slip up. Now, I think they possibly have 3 to 4 losses this year. They do not have an easy schedule in general. Like I said before, Cincinnati, USC, and UNC all have byes before meeting Notre Dame. With that being said, I still think this is our slip-up game at South Bend. I think at this point we're ranked in the top 7, most likely, maybe even higher, depending on who's slipped up around us. But CFP talk is in our head, and we head into this Notre Dame team who we think is down, may even be favored at this point. But I think going into this game, we just get caught up in our heads, and we just don't expect Notre Dame to do anything. And I think that defense, along with a great running back in Kyron Williams, who I think may have a field day on us, ends up getting the job done at home for them in South Bend. And I think this is going to be our first loss. Now, moving on, we have Wake Forest. I think has a good offense. They always have a good up-tempo offense. And if Sam Hartman doesn't end the year badly again like they have, I think they have a decent year. But the defense won't be able to hold us back, I think. And I don't know if they're going to be able to have keep up with us in a shootout like they did last year. So I think we get the W there. Pitt is a tough one. They are the definition of a trap game. And while they should be a middle-of-the-pack team in the ACC like every other year and have a good defense, I don't think Kenny Pickett is going to be able to carry them enough to keep up with us. I am high on Kenny Pickett. I think he's a great quarterback. But again, I just don't think he's going to be able to keep up with Sam Howell. After that, we play Wofford, who I think should be an easy win for us. And then, of course, we got our rivals, NC State. This team thinks that they're primed to finish second in the Atlantic behind Clemson with a real shot of winning it somehow. But I think they have to worry more about Jeff Hasley and BC. I'm very high on BC, and I'm honestly glad we didn't get them this year from the Atlantic, and we got FSU instead. But NC State's offense should be good with Leary back and a great running back in Knight. Solid O-line as well. However, this will be the last game of the year, and by now our offense will be gelled so well and running on all cylinders. And I just, again, don't think that they will be able to keep up just like everyone else, even if they're able to break Bateman's defense, which also, I mean, unless we're riddled with injuries, I think this defense is going to be cooking on all levels. So I'm also going to give us the win there as well. Now, my prediction, if we've added this all together, I think it's going to be 11-1. But I also can see us slipping a few games if we aren't careful. 2 early games versus Virginia can prove to be tough for us. 2 huge games in the middle of the season with Miami and Notre Dame, although we do have a great bye in between. This schedule just in general was just set up very well, which I also think is just going to help us a whole lot. And it's not a very hard schedule. It's probably very, very low on the totem pole of strength of schedule. And then, of course, you never know with Pitt. Pitt is always an interesting one, and even though we should have much more talent, it's always just a tough one with Pitt. And then, of course, you got the rivals at the end of the season, although I think we can handle them pretty well. You never know with the rivals. I just see Mac elevating this team to new heights further into the elite category. And while a 2-loss season wouldn't be bad, I think we could see more with a possible 11-1 and maybe even undefeated. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, head on over to Twitter and follow me at Clutch Sports UNC, and you guys have a good one.